When you're young, you think you know everything.
Mike, you realise you have an ex-pupil here tonight?
Yes.
I do. He's traumatised.
Probably quaking in his boots downstairs.
At the playground.
I take full responsibility of what I do to my pupils. When you're young, you think you know everything. I imagine Arthur Grimble thought he knew everything when he took over the job of running the Gilbert and Ellis Islands. When you Google them, you find out that the people there are called the Kiribati. This is crap. That is their way of trying to say Gilbert, the name that has been given to their islands. This fairly well demonstrates the way in which the whites have tried to impose their thoughts of order on the people who lived there before they arrived. Now, Arthur Grimble was 26, and you're in charge of this small archipelago. And to do him justice, he did want to find out about it properly. And they told him things. They said, actually, it's a long chain of islands, and the thing is this: when people die, they have to get somehow, their spirits have to get somehow right up to the northern end, because that's where they will, if they avoid the sieve, the net of Na'aka, make their way to the afterlife. And there are special paths for them. Well, can't you imagine who's going to want to go along those special paths? Arthur Grimble, 26. So he asked around, and he tried to use his authority to be taken, to be shown. He had a word with the native magistrate. They have one. Make sure that you've got somebody who actually has some authority within the community, within the group, and you lean on him and he leans on the other people. And Arthur talked to him about it. And after he had it explained to him, Arthur said, "But you're a Christian. Surely you don't believe this stuff." And the native magistrate said, "This is for those people who are still pagan, of course. Do you know anybody who could take me there? I will ask around. I will see whether we have perhaps a policeman who could take you." Well, the policeman wasn't happy, but he had got an order from the native magistrate to do it. So the policeman and the native magistrate talked, and they said, well, maybe we'll take him, we'll send him by the road that's used by strangers, so that the people from the local village shouldn't be any problems. And so he set off. And the policeman was so uncomfortable. He was rushing all the time. Grimble wanted to stop and look and soak up the atmosphere, and the policeman said, no, you must hurry. Who knows what else is happening? And so they made their way towards the northernmost tip. And Grimble got thirsty and said, I'm going to get a coconut. And the policeman said, no. No, this is the grove of Na'aka. You do not take coconuts from the grove of Na'aka. And he may have been 26 and boss of the islands, but he listened. So, very thirsty, he came down to the side of the sea, and the policeman refused to go any further. I will wait here for you, he said. You go down. You go down. And so Grimble went down. And it was rocky, and it was inhospitable, and he had a raging thirst. And the waves smashed against the rocks, again and again and again, and it gave him a headache. And he wanted, I'm sure what he wanted was some kind of little cove, you know, where the boat of the dead could put in quietly and the dead spirit could get on board and be wafted away, you know, as if it was King Arthur down by Glastonbury, as if it was Charon the ferryman. But no, there was just this surf pounding the rocks and smashing, and the foam up in the air, and the spray drifting onto him, and the salt in the spray making him even thirstier. And the whole thing giving him a headache. So he turned round, went back up the hill, called a bit, and the policeman came out from wherever he'd been, brushing his knees off. I don't know what he'd been doing, praying perhaps. And they set off back. And the policeman lagged behind, whereas before he'd been trying to get ahead, now he lagged behind. And Grimble was striding out on his way back, when he saw a fellow coming towards him, limping. Seemed like an old problem, you know, the way you can tell whether it's a fresh injury or something they're used to. He was limping. And he had a bit of a scar on his face. Grimble had never seen him before, but he thought, oh, I wonder why he's here. And he greeted him. Not in English. I mean, I'll be fair to Grimble, he did learn the language. He really did. He tried his best. And he greeted the fellow. He greeted him from a distance. He greeted him close to. He very nearly put a hand out to stop him as the fellow walked past, not saying anything, not looking at him, just blindly, ignorantly past. And when he'd gone by, Grimble stood there, arms akimbo, looking at the retreating back with a sense of outrage, because he was, after all, even if he was only 26, the boss of the island. And people who live there have to at least acknowledge your presence. And the policeman caught up with him. And Grimble said, "Did you see that?" And the policeman said, "What?" And Grimble thought, I'm not going to get anywhere with him. I'll report him and I'll report that ignorant native to the magistrate, and we'll see what happens. Because he was thirsty, and he was tired, and he was hungry. "Have we got out of the grove of Narka yet?" he said. And the policeman said, "No." So he strode out, and they came back eventually to the native magistrate's house, to the place where he was staying, because he went on a circuit through the islands. And he was fed, and he was given some water to drink and some coconut milk. And the native magistrate said, "How was it, sir?" And Grimble said, "I must be honest and say it was not remarkable. It was not what I expected. It was not as impressive as I'd hoped it might be. But you met no one." "On the contrary," said Grimble, and he told the examining magistrate about the fellow with the limp and the scar on his face. And as he was telling it, he noticed that the magistrate was looking past his head to the policeman. They were exchanging glances. And he didn't like this. He didn't like them having some kind of understanding without involving him. So he turned and said, "Well, what's going on? You seem to be communicating." And the magistrate said, it's just that, it's just that from your description, I think I know the person you saw." "Yes." "And the policeman agrees with me." "And?" "He died 3 days ago." "I want to see the body," said Grimble. 26. Trained in Western scientific method. I want to see the body. And the magistrate said, if he had died as a Christian there would be no problem, but the priests do not let people see the body once they have begun their ceremonies. And he will be buried by now. And that's the story that Grimble was honest enough to write down about himself. All about his time in the South Seas.
Ooh.